Good evening, and welcome to a very special episode of The Fire Caves, a Star Trek Deep Space Nine podcast. This is one of our After Dark specials that we love to do every so often, and I am one of your hosts, Perry.
I'm your host, David.
And so, as always, we like to do these, like I said, every so often. Nice little recap for the season that we just ended, and moving into the next phase. Tonight, we're not only going to talk about all of the stuff that happened in season four, but also kind of talk about where we think things are going to be going into season five, and of course, talking about anything else that comes to mind as we go through a lot of this. So, without further ado, I like to obviously start with David because this is his first time through with this show. And so now that we have finished season four, how are you feeling about your journey through Deep Space Nine?
Yeah, so I feel like you've said that season four is where we start noticing some changes. I guess the story gets a little more streamlined in some ways. While I do feel like season four at times did get distracted from the main story, we also did get some major changes. We got Worf joining the crew. We got the Federation and the Klingons having a breakup in relationship starting from the very first episode of the season. Um, we got Odo at the end of the season. We just finished talking about him. He's now not able to do his changeling abilities anymore. He's now been made a human by the other changelings. So they've somehow done something to him to make him a human. Um, the Jim Hadar are still a threat. I do have some comments on them, but I'll get to that a little bit later. Um, but the changelings have been infiltrating our side of the wormhole for a while now, basically. Um, and they've got into some pretty dangerous places. They've got into the Federation. They have got into the Romulans. They've gotten into at the end of the season. We see the Galron's now been replaced. So yeah, on the top level, the bigger scope things, the things that are going to affect future seasons and the big major plot elements. Those are big. Those are happening. Odo is, we now know officially, he does have feelings for Kira, even though if he won't admit them himself. He's still kind of keeping those down on, like, keeping those to himself, but other people know about it. Um, that's pretty big because he's a changeling and she's obviously a Bajoran, but she's now in a relationship with the head of the Bajorans, the first minister, and
First
not
Minister
just
Shakar.
exactly,
Hmm.
not just Vedic, but actually the actual head of the entire planet. So, yeah, we've had a lot of changes. We got, Nog has moved on. He's joined the Federation. We still got Jake. He's learning to become a writer while still on the station. Um, Quark nearly nearly lost the bar multiple times. In fact, he's been kicked out
Yeah,
of what is he, a
Ferengi Society.
there it is,
He's
Ferengi
been he's
Society.
been
Yeah.
exiled, ostracized.
So both Odo and Quark, in the course of two episodes, got kicked out of their own species, their own society, their own culture,
You
their
know,
own people.
that's actually kind of the theme of season four. It
Oh
starts
yeah,
with
Worf too. Yeah.
Worf getting that. He gets the boot in the very first opener. And then yeah, Odo and Quark follow suit.
Right.
So yeah,
And
I mean that's
Dax was
kind of been there.
willing to do that in the
Yeah,
episode
Dax
with
almost did. Yeah, she almost, in the episode rejoined. She
right.
almost took that path of exile from Trill Society as well. So yeah,
Yes.
this kind of making these hard choices. Do you follow your own sense of honor, your sense of duty, your sense of obligation to society? What do you do? Do you do that, or do you go your own way? Do you beat your own path and
Right.
accept the exile? That seems to be the theme that we're seeing here.
Yeah, even Garrick, he's already been exiled too.
Mhm.
Multiple exiles as we start to compare characters together. Um, would we say that Cisco's been exiled to Deep Space Nine? I don't think he has been.
Nah, because Deep Space Nine was definitely his rebirth, but it was always an important mission.
Right.
Bringing Bajor into the Federation fold is like the chief goal of Starfleet is of
Right.
whenever they make first contact with any species, the hope is that eventually they will join the Federation. So
Right.
yeah, uh he's doing the work. He's doing the
Right.
work that they would ideally want him to be doing. Him
And
getting involved in other stuff and becoming the emissary and everything else, that is a detraction from what they sent him there for. So
right.
yeah,
Now, First Minister Shakar in the episode where he came to the station was trying to kind of expedite joining the Federation, but as of yet, the Bajorans are still not officially part of the Federation, correct?
that's right. They are a Federation protected world. They have not officially joined. There are several steps that are involved in joining the Federation fully. Several things you have to give up and things that you have to accept and all that
Right.
kind of stuff. Like, for example, a caste system. If you have a caste system, you
That's
can't be
right.
a member of the Federation because they believe everybody is equal. There's no aristocracy and all of that kind of stuff. So,
Right.
and we did see that play out when that other guy showed up pretending to be the emissary or claiming, he should not say pretending, claiming to
Right.
be the emissary. But yeah, they ended up sending him back in time
Right.
to his place. So,
Exactly. Exactly.
but yeah, it's interesting that we actually just happened on that first because that is the whole point. That's the whole premise of this show was they were tasked with bringing the Bajorans into the Federation. But you know
Right.
what? We've never really talked about what it takes to be a member of the Federation. And I don't think any show has really gone into that. What it takes to be a member of the Federation. I mean, that was the first instance that we ever got of them talking about anything that was against the Federation charter. But
Right.
yeah, they don't. I don't think we have uh, an on-screen representation of what that would be,
Right.
what that would entail. So
Okay.
I
Interesting.
find that interesting that in all of Trek we haven't really seen that. I think that would be a great thing to focus on is the articles of the Federation, right? What do you have
Uh-huh.
to adopt in order to be a Federation member? I'm
Right.
sure that there's probably some book or apocrypha that's got something akin to that, but we don't have anything that will be considered, I guess, canon
Uh-huh.
because it's never appeared in any movie or TV show or anything like that. So,
Right.
just like the Prime Directive, now that I think about it, we hear so much talk about the Prime Directive, but they've never actually sat down and said, this is what it says, right? This is what it does.
No one's
We
ever
know.
detailed it
Right.
completely.
We know that it's kind of a general rule about non-interference and at what level of development they need to be. We've kind of accepted that that is when they develop warp drive because that's when humans made contact with another species for the first time. When Zephyr Cochrane made his first warp flight shortly thereafter, Vulcans decided that that was the time to meet humans for the first time. And
Right.
so that kind of has become the benchmark. Once the society develops warp drive, warp travel, becomes warp capable, then it's okay to expose yourself.
Right.
Expose yourself. Eh, make your presence known
Right.
at that point. But I mean, that's basically it. We don't really know anything else about what it says, what they can do. A lot of that's just kind of inferences made throughout all the years that Trek has been on. So I find that interesting too. Like at this point, 60 plus years into the franchise, I really feel like those are the things they need to go back and like explain. I have to admit I am enjoying the prequel Strange New Worlds show, but I would like for them to do something like that where they kind of spell out a few of these things.
Right.
But I guess that's ultimately would become limiting because when you make such a hard rule in your world building,
Right.
then you have to come up with reasons that you can justify breaking it. And
Right.
by keeping it kind of vague, we have all the captains have broken it or bent it, as they like to say. um, a time or two in their tenure.
Yeah. Yep. They do like to do that. Um. Yeah. The one thing the Jim Hadar, as I've mentioned in the last episode where they showed up, I think it's really interesting to see these alien cultures be explored in detail.
Mhm.
In the last episode, not the final episode, but the previous episode we did, the body parts episode, where Quark was trying to, he thought he was going to sell his dead body for money, pay off his debts, and then realized he actually didn't have the fatal disease, and so he needed to renege on his plan to sell his own dead body. Um, who's the character who's from the
Brunt,
Brunt?
FCA.
Right, FCA Brunt. His conversation with Quark, like, you're a philanthropist, you're a Federation flunky, you
Yeah,
have a union, you don't overcharge people, you didn't gouge the refugees, like
you gave
that's
it to them at cost.
cost. Yeah, stuff like that, just great. And while I like the idea of learning more about the Jim Hadar, I don't feel like any Jim Hadar character has ever had the impact of the first one. What is it? Talak from the very first time we met them, the season 2 finale. Um, that first Jim Hadar, he had such presence,
I
and
don't know.
you don't think
I would say Omedicon would give him a good run for his money.
the
He's
one
the
from
one.
like a couple episodes ago?
Yeah, we just met him. I
I'm
feel
not
like
saying he
he.
was terrible, but I feel like Talon, I mean, like when he beamed aboard the station and they tried putting the isolation field around him and he like stepped through it or whatever it was he did. I think he stepped through it.
Yeah, he just walked through it like it wasn't there.
Yeah, like not only did he beam onto the station without permission to a place where they didn't tell him, and then that happened in this last episode, which we forgot to mention. When they beamed aboard the Defiant, like he was going to meet them in the transporter bay, and they immediately transported directly onto the bridge. Like power move. They've always done it. It's always great to see them do it. But I guess what I'm getting, maybe I'm just saying, maybe on some level it's just like that was my first time to really see the Jim Hadar, and therefore they made an impression. Talak Talon made an impression because he was the first one. But I do still feel like that first Jim Hadar character of Talak Talon was a great one, and I did want to see him return. And I'm
Well,
sad that we haven't ever had. I guess Cress Williams was the actor who played him in that
mhm.
episode. I don't know if he'll ever come back in the role, but I liked him quite a lot. Um, yeah,
Well, there's something to be said about a dynamic first entrance. I mean, you're talking about the very first time we ever saw the Jem'Hadar's foot soldiers. I mean, up to that moment, we had just heard whispers of the Dominion. Like, if you think about it, going all the way back to season 2, that was the first time that we had really heard of this other force on the other side of the wormhole that
right,
was upsetting things. And then we come into the third season and we're getting more of that. Who's the Dominion? The Ferengi were trying to set up inroads with the Dominion via their Tulaberry wine sales, and the Dozai making the contact for them,
hmm
and just having to deal with that whole situation, and just knowing that there's this force we keep hearing about, the Dominion, the Dominion, the Dominion, and then finally we see the Dominion, and he beams onto the station. He lets them put the security field around him. And even when they do it, he gives them, there's this look of annoyance on his face when he's standing there. And
right,
it's just like, and then he walks right through it. It is impressive. It's startling because
yeah,
the Star Trek, the Federation force field is the ultimate stopgap. You can't
right,
get through a containment field. And
right,
then he just walked through it like it was nothing,
right,
you know.
yeah,
Great stuff. The only aliens we'd ever seen even come close to doing something like that were the Borg.
right,
The Borg had that ultimate adaptability. You couldn't contain them by a force field. That was also how we recognized their threat,
right,
was the ineffectiveness of the containment of them.
right,
So now here we have this whole other alien species that can do it too. Yeah, it's definitely a shocker power move.
right. Yeah. Speaking of the Borg, by the way, I think it's going to be sometime in the near future where my watch of Deep Space Nine will coordinate with, was it First Contact? Is that the movie that the
Yes.
Borg show up? So
Yes.
I'll have to watch that and time that up. We'll have to
Oh,
figure
don't
out
worry.
when.
I'm keeping a watch on that for you. I am
Oh, perfect.
definitely
Good, good, good.
trying to stay aware so that when the time comes, I plan to watch the movie
Ooh,
with you,
very good.
so
Good.
we
Okay.
can we can make sure that we talk about it. It'll probably be another one of these after dark specials. So again, to highlight some of the things that we've talked about here for season four, and the different ways in which the show changed, because as I've said, I feel like season four is the turning point season of this show. Season one, we're just getting used to these characters. We're finding out about them and, you know, how they fit into the greater Trek world. A lot of things still needed to be hashed out about them. We're getting a lot of that through not just season one, but into season two. Season three, some people are kind of coming into their own, but we are lacking in a lot of ways with a lot of characters. Probably chief among them would be Dax, followed closely by Dr. Bashir. O'Brien sees a lot of development. Kira gets a lot of development, season two, season three, and even Cisco, we kind of leave him off a bit and don't really return to him until like kind of midway of season three. And a lot of that also deals with his family, his father, his son, the relationship with Cassidy. All of those things are in that season three. Season four, we see the return of Worf just to Star Trek, not to just Deep Space Nine, but the return to Star Trek.
Mhm.
We get more of Odo. We certainly get more of Jadzia in season four.
Mhm.
We get a lot of things with our recurring characters now. Quark, Garrick, they have more to do here in season four than they ever had before. Bashir finally gets some much needed character development. We always had thought of him as a good guy and overall, competent doctor, but we really got to see him highlight his expertise in episodes like The Quickening,
Yeah.
which we just recently talked about. So
Yep.
all of these things, like I feel like are really important because what ends up coming up next, um, there's so much in season four that is setting the stage for what's next, more so
Uh-huh.
than any other season has done before that. We've got the instability with the Cardassians and what's going on their home front. We've got Klingons on the warpath. We've got the Dominion again cropping up and being a greater and greater threat. We
Mhm.
haven't seen any official incursions in full force from the Dominion into the Alpha Quadrant, but everything that we're seeing, if you're watching and paying attention, you'll see that it's clear they're getting closer.
Right.
Like run-ins with the Dominion have become more and more frequent. It's almost like they're starting from some far off spot deep in the Gamma Quadrant and they're moving forward. They're coming closer and closer to the wormhole.
Right.
So I really love that pacing. I really love how it's like you have to pay attention to really see how that's going down. So
Interesting. Okay. I
yeah,
hadn't really thought about
like
it that way before.
yeah, like just I mean think about it. Like in season two,
Hmm.
when we had to deal with Hanik and her people who they were
Yes.
having a hard time with the translator, she was talking about how, they had been traveling in their cobbled together ships for a couple of years trying to find a place because their last home where they had been subjugated and whatever else had been taken over by this invasion force. They didn't know who the invaders were, but the invaders caused the people who were in power to lose power, which allowed for Hanik and her people to finally escape you know
Right.
we also hear about the Dozai and their dealings with the Dominion.
Right.
And then in season three, um, we have the destruction of the Odyssey, and Cisco and Quark and his son are, well, Cisco and Quark are captured by
Right.
the Dominion. But yeah, we have that, and then we have the whole Zenketsu thing at the end of season three, which was, the infiltration with the ambassador there.
Yep.
And
Uh huh.
then, yeah, now here we are in this season, and we've now been through the wormhole, and the Cardassian Obsidian Order and Tal Shiar have been wiped out, and they're having to hide and runabouts from the Jem'Hadar. Like they're just everywhere. They've gone
Yeah.
from being this kind of whispered, fearful thing in the background to now they're just actively doing stuff and influencing our people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Um, yeah, I, the, j- in this last episode, I forgot. I guess I forgot to talk about it. Like, part of me wants Cisco to like sit down with the changelings and be like, "Look, maybe this will happen eventually, but like, just be like, look, I know you guys say you had a rough history of people attacking you, abusing you, being afraid of you. You guys are doing everything that makes us want to be afraid of you. But our intention as the Federation is to try and not that have that not be the case. Now I can't speak for all the species in the Gamma Quadrant. I can't speak for the Ferengi. I can't speak for the Klingons. I can't speak for the Cardassians or the Romulans. But like in terms of the Federation, our job is to try and make peaceful relationships between alien species happen and work. And I wish he would be like basically just kind of nail that home, like really kind of take it to them a bit, take it to the changeling woman or
Kind of
whoever.
like kind of like he does in the first episode with the prophets, in season
Yeah,
1. He
yeah,
spends a lot of time convincing them because the prophets are the same way. The prophets are like, you guys, they kept saying it, you're adversarial, you're confrontational. And
right,
so he spent a lot of time convincing them that, we're not that way. And he
right.
even says, that's part of our mission. We're here to listen, we're here to learn. That's what he
Right,
says.
right,
And yet we never see him do that, and really anyone do that with the Dominion, at least so far.
right,
But then again, kind of hard to do when every time you're around these people, they're attacking you.
right,
They're doing something to be subversive. The prophets just didn't care,
right,
but they were also like, we don't want you interfering because you have these tendencies.
right,
But they hadn't put a finite stop on on the Federation yet.
right,
And then ultimately Ben convinces them not to. The Dominion,
right.
on the other hand, I mean, hell, they blew up the Odyssey. They didn't have to, but they just did.
Yeah, yeah, they
You know,
did. They're powerful, right? That's the other thing too. Is like, how are they so much more powerful than everybody else? Like, what about what happened that they have such fantastic technology?
it's the Jem'Hadar. It's not even necessarily that they have better technology, but if you think about it, it's the Jem'Hadar because the Jem'Hadar are grown. They're not a culture. They're not a society. They are grown in tanks, and then they are chemically addicted to a substance that only the founders can make.
Well, I'm talking
They
about
don't
like
have
how do
a
they pass through that security field? How do they have the technology for that? How do they have the technology to blow up the Odyssey so
you know
effectively?
well, I mean, they rammed their ship into the Odyssey, so I mean,
Fair enough. That's true.
that's
It was
gonna
more a
that's
suicide
yeah.
mission, but they were
They
still
they had been
doing
they had
pretty
been attacking they had been attacking the Odyssey for a while, and the shields went down on the Odyssey.
right.
The Odyssey was trying to withdraw, and they kamikazed
Right.
the Odyssey. So
That's
it
true because
wasn't
they don't care for their lives like other people do
right,
too. Yeah.
right. And so I mean that's what it all comes down to. I like to think of the Dominion as a interesting allegory for, or not allegory, but interesting parallel to the Borg.
Yeah. Mhm.
They're this threat from the deep dark depths of the Gamma Quadrant. They
Right.
come through, and through either subversive tactics of the founders taking over political leaders and stuff in various cultures and whatever else, to Jem'Hadar shock troops, they take over cultures. So whatever thing that culture may have of value, they
Mhm.
essentially assimilate,
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I'm sure that, and as we have found out through Wayoon and the female changeling and so forth, the founders have existed for thousands of years. Think of the technology they've not only probably come up with on their own, but probably come across and incorporated into their own stuff over thousands of years.
Yeah. If they're able to
And yeah,
impersonate people, how much can they impersonate the memories and how much can they
part
impersonate
of
a
what
person?
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Well, I don't think
Maybe
we've
not all
ever
the
been
way.
given yeah, I don't think we've ever been given anything that says they can, like, duplicate brain patterns, but, certainly enough that they can pass muster to get, like, top secret government documents
True.
or get their hands on advanced research,
Yep.
and so doing that for thousands of years across multiple cultures, who knows what they could have, incorporated into who they are, and
Right.
that's what then turned them into a power. So now
Right.
they have whole systems dedicated to nothing but ship production or Jem'Hadar production or Ketracel White, the drug that the Jem'Hadar are addicted to.
Right.
Whole civilizations dedicated just to making that stuff, and
Yeah.
so that's why they become such a threat and a power because in an instant they can have you can be surrounded by ships and Jem'Hadar soldiers. Heck, even we saw in the most recent episode when Cisco was broadcasting the signal, it wasn't just one Jem'Hadar warship that showed up; it was like 10.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't need to show up. I mean, 2 was already a bit of overkill because you would have outnumbered them. 3 was
Yeah.
enough. They completely surrounded, 3D surrounded
The
the
Defiant.
Defiant to make
That's true.
sure.
They
To
did.
make sure that is a definite power move, show of strength. They didn't
Yeah.
need to go that hard.
Yeah. Yeah. Yep. They were waiting for him too. They showed up fairly quick, if I remember correctly, too. I mean,
They
they
did.
knew
They
Odo
dropped
was gonna
out
have a
of
problem, but
yeah.
yeah. Yeah. Um, what else was I gonna say about this season? Oh gosh. Dang it, should have written it down or something. But there's something else I guess gonna say. We got Keiko back. She was basically gone for a longer hiatus with Molly on the planet,
On
um,
Bajor.
on Bajor. Yep.
Hmm.
She's back. I don't know if I mean, they haven't said what else is going to happen next, other than the fact that she's supposed to be pregnant, but they've transferred the pregnancy to Kira. Interesting. I don't know how
Interesting
Bashir
way to
did that.
write
Yeah.
in the actual pregnancy of Nana visitor, and that's
Yes.
something that we talked about as well. Them wanting to move away from that very quintessential '90s trope of either not filming the woman from like mid chest down
Right.
or cleverly hiding her behind desks and countertops and oh, why is she holding that abnormally large sign this week, like things like that,
The
like we're
sign
not
that says
supposed to.
"Don't look at my belly." That one.
Right, that's what it might as well say,
Yeah.
you know? But, yeah, they found a better way, I think, to deal with it.
Yeah.
Um, but, yes, you're right, we do have Keiko back, and, Keiko will be around in season 5, and I think that, as we talked about before, Keiko is another one of those characters that also gets a bad rap. In fact, let's dedicate these next few minutes to talk about a couple of characters who do get a bad rap here on the show. I'm thinking of 2 in particular, Keiko O'Brien and Luoxana Troy, daughter of the 5th house, holder of the sacred
Ah,
chalice of rings, heir
yes, we have
to the
to
lowly
mention
rings
her.
of Medazed. Miss
Yes,
Luoxana Troy. She is
that's true.
fantastic. All right.
Played by none other than,
Miss Angel Barrett Roddenberry, of
yeah,
course.
of course, of course. So I guess we've already mentioned Keiko. So I think I'm sure I've mentioned this before, but I do feel like she gets. Maybe it's just you and I have talked about it. I do feel like she gets a bad rap, but I feel like it's O'Brien himself that deserves some of the critique. Like
Yeah.
he's definitely like in this last episode we just did. He was complaining that he walked in and he saw um, Kira and Keiko talking, but they stopped talking when he walked in, and Molly giggled, and he thinks they were talking about him. And it's one of those things where it's like, people are allowed to talk about you when you're not there. Quite frankly, I mean, they may have conversations that are awkward, but that's their right. And if you need, I mean, if Keiko is your spouse and you need her to tell you something, maybe you need to ask her about it. But going to your coworkers and then pouting seems very strange. I think O'Brien needs to grow some thicker skin. Because I mean, gosh, man, last season there was that one episode where he and Keiko had a real big blow up fight, and I was like, man,
Yeah.
O'Brien. But that seems to have, Oh, but that's right. When Keiko showed up with and was like, "Oh, I'm pregnant," his first reaction was like, "Oh, my bachelor lifestyle that I've been enjoying for the last year is now going to be re-interrupted by having my wife back and my kid back." and having another kid back. I was like, Brian. Okay, all right. Do you do you? But that's not how I would have done things. I don't think I would. I'm not married. I don't have kids, so I can't talk. I guess.
It's interesting, because I can remember watching this episode years ago, when it first aired, and very much feeling that way about, like what O'Brien was saying, like agreeing with him. You know, he didn't want Keiko to go to Bajor in the first place. He finally got okay with her going. And then she comes back and they got into a fight because she was like, "Oh, the mission's going great, but I'm gonna need another 7 months to be on Bajor to complete this." And he's like,
Right.
you know, his whole family is gone. I mean, his wife took their daughter, so he's been palling around the station by himself, and
Well, with
he
Bashir in tow, but yeah.
well, yeah, and he's wanting his family back, but he finally agrees, and they work it out, and she's gonna go again. So he's left to his own devices to figure out a way to, be okay with the situation and to be happy and so forth. And then she comes back finally, and she's totally disruptive and dismissive of his life and what he's been up to and whatever else. And I remember thinking that when I watched it years ago and being like, that's why Keiko got such a bad rap. Because it's like you have no regard for your husband and what he's been going through and whatever else. But now, watching it now, I saw it so different. So, like, for example, she doesn't have a disregard for what his situation is. But when she comes back, she's pregnant. And they need things to change because she's pregnant.
Right.
And she needs him to get on the ball with the changes again because she's pregnant.
Right.
And he tries at first, but then he's like, well, I was kind of looking forward to this honeymoon period of her being back. And now I've got to jump right back into not just dad role, but preparing for a newborn role. And
Uh,
so he doesn't get to tinker around with toys or whatever. He's got to get to work on building a nursery and so forth. And it's just like, but dude, I mean, that's your kid.
yeah.
Like,
Exactly. That's how I feel about it. Yeah.
yeah, step up. Like, do what you got to do. She didn't just, it's your fault she's pregnant.
Right.
So, do your part here instead of being like, all she wants to do is just be quiet and we sit and she's tired, man. She's carrying your child. Like,
Yeah. That's how I feel about it.
you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, like, and I think that that's why she got such a bad rep early on, because I just think there were so many people who just didn't pay attention to that aspect. Because I mean,
Right.
she's not showing when she first shows back up and announces that she's pregnant. She's certainly not showing.
Right.
And then in the few episodes later on, when she's talking about it again and everything else, again, it's still not altogether um, serious. And she even gives him an excuse to go and hang out with Julian and so forth. So yeah, I mean, he does a lot of whining and moaning and groaning and stuff. And as a parent, I can just tell you, it became kind of annoying because I was like, man, like, that's your kid. Step up, do what you got to do. Be
Right.
quiet. You can hang out later.
Right.
It's not like Julian's going anywhere. Like,
Right.
y'all, so yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, she definitely got such a bad rap as being this nagging, "Oh, you don't take care of your husband or whatever else." But what was he doing? It wasn't like it wasn't like she interfered with his work in any regard. He was
Right.
still able to do his job
Right.
and so forth. But yeah, he couldn't play in the holodeck as
Right.
much, and
Right.
he was crying.
Yes, that's
So
exactly what I'm getting at. I definitely feel like O'Brien has been whiny way too often. Um, I mean, his character. I mean, Bashir has matured. I'm sure O'Brien can too. Yeah, that episode where you've already alluded to it, but that episode where Bashir, just a couple episodes ago, where he was trying to help save a planet from a devastating plague that the Jem'Hadar had unleashed on their people. it was a bittersweet episode. It was really good because things didn't go as well as they might have normally. Learned a lot of times when episodes are super, kind of syrupy sweet. Things always go the way we want. No negative effects really last. Beyond the episode, everything goes back to normal. And that one, Bashir is still, when the episode closes, still trying to solve the problem. Even though he did have some success, he wasn't able to save the one girl right before she died. And yeah, so yeah, characters have matured. I still don't think Dax gets enough storylines. I guess the real question to talk about though is like how is Worf integrating into the team?
You know, well, what's your opinion on that? I'll ask you first. Like, how do you feel? Like, do you feel like Worf is fitting in? Because I mean, we've literally watched him from episode 1 of season 4, and now here we are all the way at the end, or we just finished
Right.
concluded season 4. Do you feel like he's a good fit so far, or do you feel like there's someone else from Next Generation who would have been a better fit?
Um, a better fit. I mean, the story is definitely working with him in mind, with the whole
Hmm.
Klingons going the way they did, with him having his brother show up and basically they have their kill me brother, I can't live like this situation. Um, I guess I would put it this way though. I don't feel like I've said this before. I don't feel like Deep Space Nine has ever really gelled the crew together in the way that TNG did. TNG was very focused on the idea that like our 7 to 8 crew members, Picard, Riker, Crusher, like all of them are basically the senior officers on the ship, and all of them are working to solve problems week to week. Whereas our
Hmm.
crew on Deep Space Nine has never quite gelled like that, and I do feel like Deep Space Nine has not been as good as TNG in those aspects. I do like the idea that TNG that they had what felt like a full complement of characters that were regularly interacting to solve their issues with their expertise. Picard is of course the captain, Riker's the next in command. We got the empath, we got Data as the knowledge of all. He's the fount of all knowledge. All just
Hmm.
technical things. We got Geordi, who's the engineer. Like you have they all have their place and they really fit in their place really well. Um, D69 hasn't quite ever done that. So Worf is I like the idea that there's a dedicated officer for running the Defiant. Defiant I like the idea that D Space Nine has a Federation ship associated with the station. I like that there's a dedicated officer for the ship, and so I think that Worf is a great officer for the ship. And for example, that episode where he's on trial for firing too quickly, I still feel like
Rules of Engagement. What a great episode.
yeah, I still feel. I mean, he was obviously set up, but it was so obviously a setup. I feel like it was just too on the nose, almost. Like I don't even
Well,
know.
I'm gonna say that I don't feel like it was too on the nose, but it falls into the same problem that we've noticed with a lot of these episodes. It's got such a great premise, but they need more time to develop it and they don't have it. As we've said
Right,
many times, that is an episode that would have made a great two-parter, but they
right,
just didn't do it. Because
right.
if they had drawn that out a little bit more and really made the stakes higher for us for Worf,
Uh huh.
episode to me, while still a fun and engaging episode, would have been absolutely next level if we thought that there was a real chance that Worf was going to be cashiered out of Starfleet, or
Right.
that he was going to face some kind of death by honorable firing squad, or whatever it is that's the Klingon equivalent or whatever
Yeah.
for what he did. If there, yeah, if there were just more things like that.
Right. I'm trying to remember how that episode ended. Like how oh the Klingons had faked the ship didn't have people on it, so they didn't no one actually was killed. So it was a
Right.
setup. That's right. It
Right.
was completely set up the whole time. Um but yeah. Um So yeah, I feel like Worf, of all the characters from TNG to come to this show, I do feel like he was the right one because of the way the story has gone. They've definitely
Hmm.
included him, and that's been good. Um, I guess the real, him and Cisco are interesting because Cisco basically worked really hard to get him to come and join. He and Dax have had more things to do together. Like Dax went with him to go find the Sword of Kalis. Um, so yeah, I guess I'm not going to say that Worf isn't gelling as much as again. I like the idea that TNG had a really gelled crew. Again, they were all the senior officers, which is always the critique I find. And at least I think of when I think of Star Trek, of like all of them little minions that run around on the ship in the background. We don't really know anything about their lives, but all the senior officers are always solving all the problems. They're always
Hmm.
going to the planet. They're always shooting the things or being the diplomats, and that's fine. We can't have every character obviously be in focus, and it's good to have people just in the background. um but I do feel like it feels at times like on Deep Space Nine that like we don't really see as many just people in the background, in terms of like actually in this last episode there were a lot of people looking at Odo on the promenade, and they were
Hmm.
Federation people. Actually, I forgot to mention, I thought too many of them were staring. It was so obvious they were just being really rude about it. It was like, you guys have no like tact. But anyway, but we saw more people in the background that seemed to have Federation uniforms on, which I liked because I felt that it was more populated in that sense. Um, but
Well,
yeah, I guess that's what I would say. Go ahead.
Well, they do make it a point to say that, Deep Space Nine as a space station is this kind of hub of
True.
cultural activity, and also that the Federation is kind of far away. So
Right.
it makes sense that we're not going to see that many people in Starfleet uniforms wandering around, just being around. Um, if you really want to think about it, the Federation, or it's not just Federation, um, the Starfleet personnel are
Right.
almost like a skeleton crew, with the majority of the actual workforce being made up of
Bajorans.
Bajorans.
True.
So,
Yeah,
so
that
yeah,
makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, I guess I would just say that um it it just feels like the Federation presence on a starship, which of course it's a starship, duh, was very clear, very present.
yeah,
No,
that's absolutely, you are absolutely right, and I think that the differences are 100% intentional, because they
right,
want you to be constantly reminded that this is not a starship. This
right,
is this that they don't have the same kind of direct chain of command,
right,
all of that, and I actually appreciate that, because with Next Generation, it's just like what you're talking about here. The cast, or our crew members, did seem to gel quickly and efficiently, but they all had the same background. They were all coming from Starfleet. They were all Starfleet graduates.
right,
Whereas here, what we're seeing is a mix. Now, while the
right,
majority of the command staff are Starfleet, we do have a good mix of people who are not, and also people who have kind of been out of the way a bit. Like O'Brien's not actually an officer; he's a
right,
non-com.
right,
Kira is the first officer, but she's a Bajoran
right,
national. She's in
right,
the Bajoran military. Worf was on prolonged sabbatical before he showed up,
right,
and then of course you have the Doctor, who's not really in the direct chain of command. Dax, who is, but she's Dax. I mean, there's just like, really, it's her and Cisco are the only two who are like directly Starfleet chain of
yeah,
command until they bring in Worf. Everybody else has some kind of other classification that kind of
right,
makes them special.
right,
Doctor, Bajoran provisional officer, Bajoran security officer, changeling, whatever. Yeah. So that's why there is this kind of bit of of disconnect, because
right,
they don't all have the same background. But I think that the disconnect that we see with them professionally also helps them to relate together better personally. I think they have better interpersonal dynamic when they're not on duty than what we see in Next Generation. Like, think of the episode we saw in, I guess it'd be season 2. where Kira is leaving because the Navok is going to take over her position, Lee
Right.
Nollis, and
Yeah.
how they all came into her quarters and that great bickering scene that they did, the
Oh,
rapid
that's
fire
right.
there. Um,
That was
think,
so great. Yeah, it was a great
yeah,
scene.
think of the parties that they've had, when Luoxana showed up the first time and she's causing everybody to be, kind of crazy and stuff. Um, at the Bajoran Renewal Festival, basically their new year, and everybody's chasing everybody else around.
Yeah, the
They
love
have great
triangles when they
fun.
break out. Yeah.
Yes. They have a lot of great fun things that happen.
Right.
So, and once again, the Loxana coming up, and she's kind of this odd, odd duck thrown in there with everything else they've got going on. We didn't really talk much about her when we were talking about characters who get a bad rap, but Loxana is definitely one of those that just she doesn't necessarily fit anywhere she goes, but she definitely brings another kind of a next level liveliness to what's going on
Right.
that wouldn't exist without her. And I absolutely love
Yeah.
her for it.
Yeah, that's definitely true. Yeah, she's always yeah, she brings a unique energy and character every time she shows up. Yeah. And gosh, I mean, it's funny, we just had Odo experience a pretty significant change. Everything from turning into a human to being hit on directly by a woman. And now that he's human again, I know Loxana doesn't show up ever again because of what you told me. But part of me wonders what would happen if she showed up now. He's actually human. He's actually been changed. Would
Hmm.
that change anything for her? Because she had him help her get out of a marriage by having him marry her instead, which oh my goodness. But
Yeah, that
like
was the episode The Muse. That was the last time that Majel was on any Trek, as a matter
right,
of fact. That
yeah,
was the last time. So yeah, and it's interesting that she like they don't even kind of give her like a nod here in this episode of or this last episode, Broken Link, where Odo is going through this very traumatic event, and he returns home, and it could have just been a simple thing as, he's now human, he's back on the station, and he's in his office reading a letter that she
uh-huh.
had written him, and she's just telling him, how sorry she is and all the other kind of stuff. That would have been a nice something that they
Yeah,
could have done, but, yeah, they kinda just, "Okay, she's done. That's it,"
yeah,
you know?
yeah, exactly.
So
Um,
now I will say, I think it would have been interesting to have Data on board Deep Space Nine.
David would have been great anywhere. Frankly, he's such an interesting character. Um, I guess the question is, how do you, how would he, how are you imagining he would fit in? Is there something in particular you think of, or
Well, I think that he would have been interesting in the way that he would have worked with both O'Brien and Jadzia, because, obviously with O'Brien kind of filling in for that engineering presence, and then Jadzia having her own or not military, but her own scientific expertise, which was what Data did on board the Enterprise, but
right,
having another scientifically inclined officer there
right,
for them to work with, and then him, encountering the prophets for the first time. What would the prophets make of an android, you
right,
know? And then, yeah, the Cardassians maybe would have wanted to try to get their hands on him, and dealing with the Dominion and all of those things. I think would have been very interesting to just see how he would have handled some of that. The episode where they all got beamed into the holodeck and were playing out holodeck characters. Data is always messing up the holodeck. They should really just stop plugging that guy in places. But I would love to see how his neural nets would have handled a cobbled together holosuite program that was Ferengi technology inside Cardassian, inside Bajoran tech,
right,
all running around with Federation backups jacked in here and there.
right.
You know, Data run amok on that almost broken down station. He surely would have ruined a lot of things. But I think
Yeah,
just stuff like that would have been very interesting. Or to a lesser degree, like having some recurring spots where like maybe Dr. Crusher, they reached out to Starfleet during like the quickening episode, and Dr. Crusher came with
Bashir.
Bashir, and then they had some arguments on how to do the treatment. And it still could have been very much a Bashir episode, but we
Right.
could have had another doctor there that offered a different perspective and kind of helped him, build up his expertise a bit.
Right.
I would have liked to see things like that too.
Right.
But yeah, those are the two characters that kind of stand out to me the most. And I think that the reason I also would have said Beverly was simply because we don't really get to see much of her do anything in next gen. So, she was really starting to come into her own towards the end of the run of the show.
Mhm.
So I would have liked to have seen that kind of continue, a branching out of Beverly Crusher.
Right. Okay. Well,
All
we
right.
should. I think we've already kind of hinted at it, but the one thing I definitely wanted to get from you this time is give us your take on modern Trek. Let me
Okay.
preface it this way: I've heard people complain about modern Trek as being like there's disrespectful characters to superior officers. There's not the same level of respect that's given. On Discovery, you got the Klingons were changed too much, and I think you and I have talked about that. But
Yeah.
you maybe give your quick opinion on some of that
All
stuff.
right.
Yeah, what's modern Trek? Give us the Perry defense. Why is a musical episode acceptable in the middle of was that I guess that was Strange New Worlds that did a
That was
musical.
Strange New Worlds, and that was season whatever season they're on. It was in the most recent season. All right. So first, I'm going to preface this by saying this to all of you long-term Dyed in the Wool fans. You've been watching since you were knee high to your parents, and Kirk was your first love, and all the rest of it. And you're still with us 50 plus years later, and you've got such a big gripe about all the new shows. And here's the shows that I'm considering new, just for the record. It's anything after Enterprise. Okay. Enterprise ended in 2004, I think. I'm not 100% sure on that, but I think it was 2004.
Mhm.
So anything after that. So that means Prodigy, Lower Deck, Strange New Worlds, the latest Picard show, Discovery, those. All right.
Right.
So, to all of you people who are those are the shows that you have issues with in one way or another, I'm going to tell you this: lighten up. All right, just do yourself a favor and lighten up. All right, it's first and foremost it's a TV show. It's meant to be entertainment, and nothing stays in the box. Okay, so when Star Trek was first started, yes, there was a very clear idea helmed by Gene Roddenberry, what he wanted to do, but Gene Roddenberry was not an infallible god being creating shows. For every great idea, it's well documented that for again every great idea he had, the man had some true stinkers. All right. So so let's not say that this is a betrayal of Gene Roddenberry's vision, because if we were staying true to Gene Roddenberry's vision, then Ferengi would have multiple genitalia and Deanna Troy would have walked around with a third breast. All right. So calm down. Um
And that's
Now
quite literally true, right? Like
it's
that's
very true. Go look it up. That's what he wanted. That's what
yeah,
he wanted.
right.
All right.
I mean, I
So,
think that the Ferengi do have extra genitalia if you consider their ears and the way they get
but they were
treated, but
supposed to be, yeah, it was supposed to be no extra
literal,
penises
literal
and
extra.
extra and also very, very large and showy. Okay. So,
I still think he
um,
got his wish on some level, but okay.
I really don't know how he ever thought that was going to get greenlit. I don't know. But anyway, when it comes to the new Trek, one of the main gripes that we have is like I'm going to start with Discovery because it was the first new show that
Mhm.
came out, and it was everybody was overly emotional, and that there doesn't seem to be enough time to develop to let us get to know certain characters, and then they go off to do whatever, or they die, or whatever the situation may be. Um, I honestly believe that this could be solved if we just had more episodes. Again, as we just were talking, we just wrapped up episode 26 of season 4. And that's kind of the average for Deep Space Nine, having 25 to 26 episodes a season. That's like unheard of now. When the first writer strike happened back in 2005, I'm going to say 2005, 2006, that was one of the main things that got the axe through that writer strike. No more long seasons, no more 18-hour days of filming to get 2 and 3 episodes done and all that kind of stuff. So
Mm,
that became the way of the dodo of 26, 25 episode seasons. I
interesting.
remember when we started playing with it and they were shortening it, and some things had like 18 episodes a season, some had 15, then 13 seemed to be the magic number for a while, and then it was like 10. Now that still seems to be the case. It's like 10 to 12 depending on the type of show and if they're going to do a special or whatever it is, but 10 to 12 seems to be the going number. So
Right.
with that comes a need to make sure that every episode has intent,
Right.
has impact. You
Right.
don't get random episodes like Data's Day, for example, where Data was tap dancing with the doctor in the holodeck 1 minute and he's not officiating, but he's bearing witness at a wedding the next, and he's kind of doing this rambling monologue throughout the episode. We don't have stuff like that because there's just not time. We need to make sure that the story that's being presented and told, that they're hitting all the beats. We don't have moments, we don't have enough time to develop these moments of friendship and camaraderie, not the way that we had been used to, because now they only do it for the effect of it's important to this specific story that we're trying to tell. Instead of
Right.
us getting to see it sprinkled through multiple episodes in a season, they do it in like 1 to 2 episodes and then they got to move on. Same thing is true of characters. We have to burn through these characters because there's not the we don't have the budget to draw this out 20 episodes, you know?
Right.
And we need our characters to show growth every episode because again, we don't have 25 episodes to show them gradually moving from being hesitant to do this thing to gung ho. They've got 42 minutes. So in the first two, you can be hesitant, but by minute 13, we need you on board because we just don't have the time to, and they try to do their whole trickery and we don't know in between the commercial breaks how much time has passed, and they'll make a reference, oh well, just a couple of weeks ago, but it was all the same episode.
Right.
So by sacrificing the longer season,
Right.
we have to make allowances for these certain aspects of storytelling now in order to get it done. If you don't like it, then you have no one to blame but yourself, because that was one of the other complaints that we had a lot about older Trek. Too many filler episodes. But now we find out we need those. We need those. Sometimes those filler episodes, they seem stupid, but they give us these extra bits about characters that make the character more relatable.
Right.
Um Also, Star Trek has always been a reflection of the time in which it was filmed. Knowing that and looking at some of the stuff that's come out in this newer Trek era, you have to remember what's going on in the world and is influencing the writers in the writers' room when they're coming up with these episodes, right? So we had the whole world shut down due to COVID. We've got this continuing, evolving Ukraine Russia situation. We've got supply chain issues here in the States, and we've got you know, inflation like crazy and medicine run amok and just all of these things that are very that are all tied to like traumatic events and people just being emotionally exhausted from having to deal with all of these things that are kind of pulling us in every which kind of direction. And a lot of Trek is, especially the new Trek, is like that. There's
Right.
so many times where you feel like, oh, they finally solved this crisis. We can relax, and then boom, you're right back into something else. And you're like, Jesus, like, and I mean, that was what was going on with the characters, especially in Discovery. Discovery, it seemed like they just couldn't help it, man. They wouldn't even fully solve one problem before they were already neck deep in the next problem. And so when you're already riding that kind of emotional roller coaster, to then see it played out on the screen probably was more triggering for people than they might have wanted to admit. But one of the things that I loved the most about Discovery was it showed them handling it. No one was trying to be all stoic with their pain and their grief and struggling in silence and in darkness, like which is what we see in a lot of the older shows. They present this, the captains in particular always present this outward facade of poise and
Professionalism and
strength
yeah,
and courage, and it's like everybody's doing the constant hero pose all the time.
right,
Whereas in Discovery, they let you see that they are also struggling with these things. They didn't necessarily do it on the bridge, but like Michael Burnham in particular, she did have her breakdown, she did have her flaws, but she did it in a way that it allowed people to understand her, and it didn't compromise what else was going on the ship. Um, and I think that's a strength. I think that it shows maturity, that she was able to get her job done in spite of the fact that she was emotionally compromised. She wasn't having to hide in the ready room to
right.
gather herself to do this. Um, but yeah, it's just not something that we saw a lot of, and I think it was just foreign to people because we're so used to our characters, especially our hero characters, always seeming to have the answer or get over the thing quickly, you know? And it always strikes me as so odd when people are like, "Oh, I hate that she has this emotional whatever breakdown," when undeniably, one of the best episodes of Next Generation features Picard brought low. And I'm not talking about Best of Both Worlds where he's the Borg, whatever. I'm talking about after that,
The
when
very
he
next
went
episode.
home,
Yep.
right, when he went home to La Berre, France, and his brother broke him down, and they're slinging mud at each other, and then he's crying in the whatever, in the vineyard,
Yep.
and everybody says, "Oh my God, it's such an amazing episode, such a powerful episode," and it's like, well, what? Yeah, why is it such a powerful episode? Because this guy finally stopped hiding his pain, and he
Right.
acknowledged it,
Right.
and he took care of it, and he didn't just get over it right away. He was still struggling at the end of the episode. He was
Right.
still struggling with it, but he was at least acknowledging it and working his way through it.
Right.
But now we move into the new Trek where they're doing that only more so. They're letting other characters also voice their upset. We have Detmer, the pilot on Discovery. She, is severely traumatized at one point and has an outburst at dinner, and then we see her recognizing that she's struggling, and she goes to a therapist, and she starts talking and trying to get help, and everybody's like, "Oh, they're so emotional all the time." Oh my God, far be it for someone to recognize they have a problem and try to get help for it. Like, it just blows my mind that that was an objection for
Gotcha.
people.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, all of that to say, like, all the shows have their moments or whatever, but people find the weirdest things to suddenly be upset about, and you're missing out on actually enjoying the show if you would just give it a chance. And to that end, I'm going to say, go watch Lower Decks. If you're not going to watch the other ones, at least go watch Lower Decks. That show is hilarious. It is absolutely hilarious. And the objections I've heard about Lower Decks being, oh, it's stupid, it's silly, it's making fun of Trek, it's not real Trek. It absolutely is real Trek. It's almost like I feel like it's what you want, and you don't realize it's what you want because it's characters dealing with certain scenarios the way I feel like we would like it. And by what I mean when I say we, I mean if someone beamed us up right now, our 21st century selves, and
Right.
brought us into this very strange world and said, and not just said welcome, but said handle this, you would probably run screaming. You wouldn't know what to do if you were faced with a giant multi-tentacled alien or a angry irate one-eyed Klingon or a God forbid you encounter the dreaded Moopsie. So if you don't know what Moopsie is, again, go watch Lower Decks. That's probably the most fun I've had watching an episode
You told me about
ever.
Moopsie. I forget what was the thing. It was
It's a little white bear-like creature. Um,
but it sucks your
probably no,
bones out or something.
yeah, probably no bigger than a house cat, but it drinks your bones, and all it says is Moopsie. So it's this cute, cuddly looking thing that slowly waddles across the whatever, but is vicious, absolutely vicious. And I have had no end of fun teasing my daughter with
But
Moopsie. I told her I was going to buy a Moopsie plushie and hide it around the, hide it around and let her find it
oh
because
no.
it's hilarious.
Oh my gosh.
But yeah, I mean, and then they still have their also, semi-serious storylines. They've got a character who had part of his brain replaced, and there was kind of a dark reason why that happened. So I mean, there's a lot to love about it, but you're never going to get there if you're already coming into it with your eyebrows fixed and your arms crossed and being like, "This ain't my Trek." It's not always about you, Steven. Calm down. All right, let someone else have something. Learn to enjoy things, and if you do watch it and you decide you just don't like it, fine. That is okay too. We're not going to shun you from the fandom and from the franchise because you don't like it. But allow other people to like it. Move on. In almost every instance of every Trek that has ever come out, there has been a large group of people who did not like it. Okay. But over time, those shows bore out. When Next Generation started, absolutely no one liked that show. They didn't want the show. They rioted that it wasn't going to be Kirk, Spock, and all them. But let's not forget, even the original series barely made it 3 seasons because the show was so thoroughly unpopular that they were going to take it off the air. If it wasn't for a write-in campaign from the fans, it never would have got that third season. All
Right.
right. Next Generation, again, criminally not popular. And now it's like the most popular Trek show. Deep Space Nine, often considered by many to be the equivalent of the redheaded stepchild of the franchise, is now seeing a resurgence in popularity and people talking about it. Heck, we do our podcast about it and talk about the kind of renaissance that the show is having now, some
Right.
30 years later.
Right.
And don't even get me started on Enterprise. All right. Enterprise, when it first came out, God, did everybody hate it. Only made it 4 seasons. And now everybody's like, oh my gosh, so much potential. There's so much that could be said about Enterprise right now and the weird rebirth that it's having, even to the point where there have been petitions to start the show again where it left off, or to fast forward it even to explain the aging of the people now. Because
Characters. Yeah.
again, they're all like,
It's 20 years ago. Yeah.
yeah, they're all like 40 and 50 now in some cases.
Yeah.
So yeah, every show has been fraught with this stuff. You're not the first to say you didn't like the show. You're certainly not going to be the last. And yeah, I would hate to see these same people be on the other side of this 20 years from now and being like, man, Lower Decks is really ahead of its time. And Prodigy was actually an understated show. And man, Discovery really just blew me away. I really feel like that's what's going to happen with Discovery. I feel like 15 years from now, when they're doing some other Trek show or whatever it is, some other sci-fi, there's going to be a large group of people who are just going to be like, man, Discovery really got a lot of things right. So Discovery really did all this up, and we're going to hate and kick ourselves that it only got 5 seasons when it should have had 15, and it'll all be y'all's fault. So to all that, again, I'm going to end it by saying what I said when I first started all this: lighten up. Okay? Watch the shows. Enjoy the stuff. If you don't enjoy it, turn it off. Shut up. Don't go on Reddit and scream into the void about how much you hate a show or a character or whatever else. Because a lot of you, when you do this, your ageism is showing, your sexism is showing, your racism is showing, like all of these things, and you don't even realize it. So cut it out. Let other people have things. There.
All right. You said your piece.
I'll also say Strange New Worlds is a gem. Go watch it. It's great. We didn't actually talk about the reason for why a singing episode could work, and I guess I'll just say that really quickly. It works because it's Trek, guys. It's sci-fi. They can do whatever they want. All right, just let it happen. If you don't like musicals, turn it off. Jesus.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Well,
Gotcha.
anything else that I can, drop some
Knowledge facts.
opinions
Knowledge
on?
facts.
Yeah, I love doing that. I can
Truth
do this all
bombs.
day. I can do this all day.
Think I'm good.
Um, hmm. Well, real quick, since we are at the end of season 4 and we're going to be going into season 5 next, we did also talk about how with season 5 we are also going to be starting um, the 5th book of the Expanse series. I was just looking around real quick. I thought I had mine. I don't.
Nemesis
It's
games. Yeah.
Nemesis Games. Yes, we will be starting that one. We will probably do like 2 after darks about Nemesis Games. Basically, when we hit the halfway point, and then at the end. So that's how we do that. If you are following along, go ahead and pick that book up, and go ahead and start reading it now. And we'll talk about scheduling for that after dark when we get a little bit closer to it. But I'm actually really excited. I want to get into this book. I really loved how the 4th one ended. Seeing the return of Avasarala. I'm hoping that she's
Mm.
in this one more, and also kind of going back through the 5th season of the show and seeing just how they kind of sped things up. Because again, the show only has 6 seasons. We know there are 9 books. Here we are in the 5th, whatever, 5th
Yeah.
book. So I want to
Yep.
see how all that goes.
Yeah.
I'm rubbing my hands together, and it's just like I don't know. It's my thing. Yeah.
I look forward to
So
it too. Yeah.
yeah. Well, I think that's going to actually do it for this After Dark. Do you have anything you would like to add? What about your experience with Trek so far? Is there anything you're excited for, looking forward to in not just season 5 of Deep Space Nine, but maybe in just Trek in general?
No, I guess I'll just quickly say that I never expected to be a Star Trek fan. I thought it was kind of it passed me by, and therefore I wasn't interested in joining it. So the fact that you've got me into it is a little thing I never expected. So
You're welcome. You're welcome. I'm trying to actually bring another I guess mutual friend, mutual colleague into the Trek and also Expanse fold.
oh yeah, okay,
Remember our old colleague Caleb?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I did get him into Trek several years ago when we actually worked together. Um, but he didn't follow the path that you did. He started watching Deep Space Nine and then went back and did Next
TNC.
Generation.
Oh
Not
wow.
really sure why. And then he like started Voyager and then didn't like it. So I don't know if he ever finished it or not. It's been a while since I've talked to him about it. But
Huh.
I'm trying to get him now to watch The Expanse. Kid just won't sit down. I don't know what his deal is. I'm flabbergasted at the way that he has avoided watching The Expanse. So
Right.
every time, like we don't speak that often, but when we do speak, I'm always like, "Do you watch Expanse yet?" He's like, "No." So I was like, "Okay, well, I mean, I don't know why you're calling me. Until you watch it, I kind of just don't want to hear from you." So
Everyone, this is the same man who, when like Squid Games came out, was like, "I ain't watching no Squid Games." Everyone else tells me to watch Squid Games. I ain't watching Squid Games. Perry's telling people to watch stuff, but he doesn't like being told what to watch. So,
that's different. Not everybody can operate the way that I operate. Okay, I will get
fair
there
enough.
eventually.
Fair enough.
I
You do
just
watch quite a lot. That's true.
yeah.
You
I,
usually give both shows a chance at least once. So.
and to be completely fair, or to be completely honest, I'm not sure why I do that. I'm really not. I don't know why when someone tells me so adamantly to watch something, why my brain like just ticks off of, oh, we're not going to do that. To this day, I still haven't watched Breaking Bad because my brother-in-law
Still talks
is
about
such a diehard about it. He is
it.
on me. And I mean, like we'll be talking and he'll just be like, "Oh, by the way, have you watched Breaking Bad yet?" And I'm like, "Oh, now I gotta wait a whole another month before I can even think about starting the show. Thanks a
Yeah,
lot. Like,
yeah.
don't say anything. I will
For
get
the record,
there."
I have to say, so my coworker made me play the Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild game. He was like, "It's so good, you have to play it." It's like, "I'm sure it's good. Yeah, I'm sure it's great." Blah blah blah. And then he made me play it. He won a little contest basically. He made up a little contest specifically so he could make me play it, and I enjoyed it. So I get it. There are times when people tell you this thing is great, you're gonna love it, and you're like, you don't know me, you don't know me,
Yeah.
you can't tell me what I'm gonna like, and then they were right.
And I've honestly been that always been that way. I remember when the Harry Potter series came out and my younger sister was reading it and she was, "You've got to read it. You've got to read it." You know, it took me like 3 years before I finally picked up the first Harry Potter book.
Yeah,
Just because every time I saw her, she'd be like, "Oh, have you read it?" And then there'd be a new one that came out. "Well, you
yeah,
can't read this one till you read that one." Oh, really?
yeah.
Really?
Tell me what I'm gonna
Well,
read.
right. You don't tell me. So yeah, I was 3 years late to that whole scenario, phenomenon,
Yeah,
whatever, because I just thankfully, I mean, it's a book, so I mean,
yeah.
you
Not
know,
a TV show, that's for sure.
yeah. Well, okay, I
Wow.
think that's gonna
Okay.
really close us out here for this,
It is literally
after dark.
midnight for us when we're recording this as we
Yes,
finish this very moment.
that's right, officially Monday, so and we
Yeah,
both have work tomorrow, so yeah, this is a
yep,
great time to cut it off.
that's true.
As I say every single week and whatever we're doing, you can find us and follow us across all the social medias, including X, and you can listen to us anywhere you happen to listen to podcasts. I happen to do it on Spotify. So, until I guess it'll be 2 weeks because we have the final episode of season 4, then we have this, and then we'll be back. So that's
Right.
3 weeks, actually.
Yes.
So it will be back in 3 weeks, and, you
No, by
guys
the
have
time
a
people
great one.
hear this, it'll be 2. By the time people hear
Yeah,
this, it'll be 2.
by
Yes.
the time they hear this, it'll be 2
There
weeks,
will
but
be
for us, it'll
no
be
there will be no stoppage in regularly released content, but for us, it'll be 3 weeks that we record.
well, actually, there will be a slight stoppage in live content. There will be no live
True.
content for 2 weeks, but
Right.
the
That's true.
actual podcast will continue on schedule.
Right.
All right.
There you go.
Yes. Well, all right, guys. Until next time, take care of yourselves.
Thanks, guys.